Hello there, and welcome back. Tonight, we're diving deep with the narwhal, a whale that decided the freezing, pitch-black Arctic waters were the perfect place to call home, armed with nothing but a single giant tooth sticking out of its face. The truth is, if you found yourself in their world for even 5 minutes, treading water in sub-zero temperatures, hunting in complete darkness, dodging killer whales, you'd be done. But they've been doing this for millions of years. Before we plunge into those icy depths, a quick request. If you genuinely enjoy what I do here, please subscribe. It helps the algorithm show this to other people who are struggling to sleep, helping them find their way here too. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. Now, get comfortable. Pull that blanket up a little tighter. Let's go back to the very beginning, to the moment life first stirs in the cold, dark waters of the Arctic. You exist, which is honestly more than most things can say, after spending 14 months crammed inside what amounts to nature's most uncomfortable studio apartment. Your mother's womb wasn't exactly spacious, and now here you are making your grand debut into the Arctic Ocean, which, congratulations, is essentially a giant slushy that never melts and wants to kill you. The water hits your brand new skin like a slap from an ice cube, except this ice cube is the size of an entire ocean and has been waiting millions of years to remind you that life wasn't supposed to be comfortable. Your first breath isn't air, because that would be too easy. No, it's a mouthful of seawater that tastes like someone dissolved a salt mine in liquid nitrogen. The cold doesn't just touch your skin, it reaches through your flesh and starts rearranging your internal organs just to make sure you understand exactly how unwelcome you are here. Your body, all 3 feet of blubbery optimism, starts shivering immediately, which is your nervous system's way of saying, well, this was a terrible idea, but we're committed now. Your mother's flippers brush against you, guiding you toward the surface, and you can feel her heartbeat thrumming through the water like a bass line that's been playing the same song for 40 million years. It's oddly comforting, this rhythm, probably because it's the only thing in this entire frozen wasteland that doesn't seem actively trying to end your brief existence. Her heart beats with the casual confidence of someone who's been doing this Arctic survival thing for decades, while your heart is beating like it's trying to escape your chest and find somewhere warmer to live. The pressure of the water presses against your tender new body like a full-body hug from someone who doesn't know their own strength and has hypothermia. Every square inch of your skin is getting acquainted with a cold that doesn't just chill, it penetrates. This isn't the kind of cold you experience when you forget a jacket. This is the kind of cold that makes you wonder if warmth was just something you imagined, a fever dream from your time in the womb when temperatures actually made sense. You struggle to stay afloat, which is harder than it sounds when you're basically a torpedo-shaped balloon that's never had to deal with physics before. The water has a current that pulls and pushes you like an invisible hand that can't decide what it wants to do with you, sometimes drawing you toward your mother's protective bulk, sometimes trying to drag you away into the blue-black void where things with bigger teeth than yours are probably having lunch. The scent of seaweed and brine fills whatever passes for your nasal passages, a smell that's going to become as familiar as your own reflection, assuming you ever get the chance to see one. Your tongue gets its first real taste of ocean, and it's like licking a frozen sidewalk that someone has been salting for centuries. The salt lingers, coating your mouth with the flavor of regret and minerals that have been dissolved out of rocks that used to be mountains. This is your new normal. Everything you'll ever eat, every breath of water you'll take, every sensation you'll experience is going to be filtered through this overwhelming presence of salt and cold and the vague threat of becoming something else's dinner. The surface seems impossibly far away, even though you're probably only a few body lengths down. Distance is relative when you're a newborn trying to figure out how to work flippers that feel about as coordinated as wet spaghetti. Your mother nudges you upward, her massive bulk creating currents that push and pull at your small frame, and you realize that this is probably the safest you're ever going to be, pressed against something larger than the things that want to eat you, guided by someone who actually knows how to navigate this liquid ice sheet. When you finally break the surface, that first gulp of actual air hits your lungs like a surprise party nobody wanted. The Arctic atmosphere is so cold it makes the water feel tropical by comparison, and your skin goes into full revolt, trembling with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for dental procedures. The air burns as it enters your lungs, each breath a reminder that even something as basic as breathing is going to be a challenge in this place that evolution clearly designed as a practical joke. But then you sink back down into the water, and there's this moment, just a moment, where the liquid cold wraps around you like a blanket made of liquid nitrogen, and your body starts to remember that it was actually built for this. Your blubber, all few inches of it, begins doing what blubber does best, insulating you from a world that wants to freeze dry you into jerky. The shivering starts to subside, not because it's getting warmer, but because your body is slowly accepting its fate and beginning the lifelong process of maintaining a core. Temperature in an environment that would turn a human into a popsicle in minutes. Your mother's side provides a reference point in this endless blue-grey world, her warmth radiating through the water in a way that makes you understand why baby narwhals don't venture far from mum. She's like a living, breathing space heater in a universe made of ice cubes, and the rhythmic thrum of her heartbeat under your cheek becomes the closest thing to a lullaby you're going to get. It's steady, reliable, the sound of someone who has figured out how to make this impossible lifestyle work, at least so far. Above you, ice floes shift and creak with the sound of the world's largest, slowest demolition project. The weight of these floating ice mountains presses down on the water, and you can feel their presence like a ceiling made of frozen menace. The creaking and groaning echoes through the water, a constant reminder that even the seemingly solid parts of your world are temporary, shifting, ready to rearrange themselves without consulting you about whether this fits into your schedule. The sound of distant ice breaking travels through the water like thunder, vibrations that you feel in your chest before your ears process them as sound. It's your first lesson in Arctic acoustics. Everything here is louder, more resonant, more ominous than it has any right to be. The breaking ice sounds like the planet clearing its throat, getting ready to deliver some bad news, and those vibrations settle deep in your bones like a warning you don't yet know how to interpret. You take another tentative gulp of seawater because apparently this is your life now. The brine slides down your throat, foreign but necessary, and you start to understand that every basic function of existence is going to require adapting to conditions that would send most creatures running for warmer climates. But here you are, a 3-foot testament to the power of evolutionary stubbornness, learning to call this frozen hell home. Welcome to your new world, which is basically what would happen if someone took the concept of hospitality and buried it under several thousand tons of ice. You're floating in what the tourism board would probably call pristine Arctic waters, but what any reasonable creature would recognize as a liquid refrigerator that extends in every direction until it hits more ice. The water around you isn't just cold, it's the kind of cold that has opinions about your life choices and wants to share them through every nerve ending you possess. Your small, sleek frame bobs in this frozen wasteland like a cork in a martini that nobody ordered, and the ice-cold water presses against you with the enthusiasm of a debt collector. Every current, every subtle shift in temperature feels amplified against your tender new skin, which is still figuring out that its job description now includes interface with liquid nitrogen on a full-time basis. Your body shivers with the dedication of someone operating a jackhammer, because apparently your nervous system thinks vibrating rapidly will somehow negotiate with physics on your behalf. The current has its own agenda, which mostly seems to involve reminding you that you're not in charge here. Sometimes it pulls you toward the comforting bulk of your mother, like a gentle suggestion that maybe staying close to the large, experienced mammal is a good idea. Other times it tugs you away from safety with the casual indifference of a bureaucrat processing paperwork, nudging you toward the open water, where things with more teeth and fewer scruples are conducting their daily business. You learn quickly that fighting the current is like arguing with gravity, technically possible, but ultimately a waste of energy you can't afford to lose. The smell of seaweed and brine fills your world with all the subtlety of someone wearing too much cologne in an elevator. It's not exactly unpleasant, but it's overwhelming in the way that only nature can be when it decides to assault all your senses at once. The seaweed smell has that organic, slightly rotting edge that suggests life and death are basically roommates down here, taking turns doing the dishes and leaving their laundry everywhere. The brine carries the weight of dissolved minerals that used to be part of continents, now floating around like the world's most expensive seasoning that you never asked for on your food. Your first real taste of the ocean settles on your tongue like a liquid argument between salt and regret. The flavour is so intensely briny that it makes you wonder if someone accidentally dissolved the entire Dead Sea in your drinking water, then added extra salt just to make a point. This taste is going to become as familiar as your own heartbeat. Every meal, every breath, every moment of your existence is going to be seasoned with this overwhelming presence of sodium chloride and whatever else the ocean has decided to throw into the mix. It's like being on a permanent low-sodium diet, except in reverse, and nobody asked if you were okay with this arrangement. Your mother's body provides a warm contrast to this liquid ice rink, her bulk radiating heat like a biological space heater that happens to have flippers. When you press against her side, you can feel her heartbeat thrumming through the water with the steady confidence of something that has figured out how to make this impossible lifestyle work. Her heart beats with a rhythm that says, "I've been doing this for decades, kid, and somehow I'm still here," which is probably the closest thing to encouragement you're going to get in this frozen wasteland. The vibration of her pulse travels through your tender body like a reminder that survival is possible, even if it's going to be annoying. The water itself has texture, which seems wrong somehow. It should just be wet, but instead it has this thick, heavy quality that makes every movement feel like you're swimming through liquid, concrete that someone left in a freezer overnight. Each stroke of your tiny flippers meets resistance that seems designed to remind you that grace and efficiency are luxuries you haven't earned yet. The water clings to your skin like it's personally invested in making sure you understand exactly how much energy every single movement is going to cost you. Above you, the ice shifts and groans with the sound of the world's most pessimistic orchestra tuning their instruments. The creaking and grinding echoes through the water like someone dragging furniture across the floor of an apartment upstairs, except the apartment is the size of a continent, and the furniture weighs several million tons. These sounds travel through the water with a resonance that you feel in your bones before your brain processes them as audio, a constant reminder that even the seemingly solid parts of your world are just slow-motion disasters waiting to happen. Your vision in this underwater twilight zone is about as useful as a chocolate teapot. The light that manages to penetrate this far down has been filtered through ice and water until it's basically just a suggestion of illumination, like someone trying to read by candlelight during a power outage. Your eyes, positioned on the sides of your head like a prey animal that evolution clearly didn't have high expectations for, can pick up movement and general shapes. But details are a luxury, reserved for creatures that live in places where the sun actually shows up for work. The pressure of the deep water presses against you like a full-body hug from someone who doesn't understand personal space and has been hitting the gym. Every few feet deeper you go, the water gets more insistent about reminding you that it weighs considerably more than you do and has strong opinions about the laws of physics. Your small body adjusts to this pressure with the grudging acceptance of someone learning that their new job has a dress code that includes being slowly compressed by liquid weight. Your flippers, these paddle-shaped appendages that are supposed to be your primary means of navigation, feel about as coordinated as chopsticks in the hands of someone who's never seen Asian cuisine. They push through the thick, resistant water with all the grace of a shopping cart with a broken wheel, and you start to understand that becoming an efficient swimmer is going to require the kind of practice usually reserved for learning musical instruments or advanced mathematics. Each stroke is a negotiation with physics, and physics is winning. The cold seeps into your body with the persistence of a telemarketer, finding new places to settle and make itself comfortable despite not being invited. Your blubber, that thin layer of insulation that's supposed to be your biological heating system, is working overtime like a furnace in a house with no insulation, burning energy just to maintain the basic temperature necessary for keeping your organs functional. It's your first lesson in the economics of Arctic survival. Everything costs more energy than you think it should, and the bills are due immediately. Trust me, you're getting a crash course in what it means to be a warm-blooded creature in a place where warmth is basically extinct, and your body is learning to be efficient with heat in ways that would impress an accountant. Every calorie becomes precious, every movement calculated, every moment of rest a strategic investment in staying alive long enough to see what other delightful challenges this frozen paradise has in store for you. So here's where things get really fun. And by fun, I mean you're about to discover that breathing air in the Arctic is like inhaling razor blades that someone left in a freezer overnight. Your first real gulp of atmosphere hits your lungs with all the gentleness of a meteorite impact, because apparently the universe decided that regular cold wasn't challenging enough and needed to invent a new category of temperature that makes ice cubes feel like tropical vacations. The air is so cold it actually burns as it enters your respiratory system, which seems like a design flaw that nobody bothered to fix during the 40 million years your species has been doing this routine. Your skin trembles with the enthusiasm of someone operating a paint mixer, because your nervous system has apparently decided that violent shivering is the appropriate response to discovering that the atmosphere above water is somehow even more hostile than the liquid refrigerator you just escaped. The northern atmosphere doesn't just surround you, it attacks you, pressing against your wet skin like a cosmic ice pack that extends in every direction until it hits more ice, more cold, and more reasons why this place should have been marked uninhabitable on the evolutionary real estate listings. But here's the kicker. After that initial shock of Arctic air trying to freeze dry your internal organs, you sink back down into the water, and suddenly the liquid nitrogen bath feels almost cozy by comparison. It's like stepping out of a sauna into a snowbank, then jumping back into the sauna. Except the sauna is still below freezing and trying to kill you, just more slowly and with better customer service. The water wraps around you with what you could generously call embrace, though it's more like being hugged by a very large, very cold, very wet entity that has commitment issues and might try to drown you later. Your blubber, all few precious inches of it, finally starts earning its keep, working like a biological heating system that someone installed with a minimum warranty and no instruction manual. It's not exactly efficient yet, but it's trying, insulating your vital organs with the dedication of someone who knows that unemployment in this job market means immediate death. The layer of fat beneath your skin begins the complex process of maintaining your core temperature in an environment where thermodynamics basically laughs at the concept of warm-blooded creatures and suggests you try being a popsicle instead. The shivering starts to subside, not because you're getting warmer. Let's be clear, you're never going to be warm again, but because your body is slowly accepting its fate like someone signing a lease for an apartment they can't afford in a neighborhood they don't want to live in. Your muscles stop their frantic vibrating and settle into the more sustainable rhythm of low-grade, constant tension, which is apparently how narwhals maintain their core temperature while living in what amounts to a giant slush machine that never stops running. Your mother's side radiates heat like a biological space heater wrapped in blubber, and when you press against her, you understand why baby narwhals don't venture far from mum. She's like a living, breathing furnace in a world made entirely of ice cubes, and the rhythmic thrum of her heartbeat under your cheek becomes the closest thing to a heating bill you're never going to have to pay. Her heart beats with the steady confidence of someone who has figured out the complex mathematics of staying alive in a place where the margin for error is measured in minutes, not hours. The sound of her pulse travels through your tender body like a biological metronome, keeping time for a song that's been playing for millions of years. The song of survival in conditions that would send most creatures running for warmer climates faster than tourists leaving a restaurant with bad reviews. Her heartbeat says, "I've been doing this impossible job for decades, and somehow I'm still here," which is probably the closest thing to a pep talk you're going to get in this frozen wasteland that masquerades as a habitat. Above you, the ice floes continue their eternal performance art piece called making ominous noises while slowly rearranging the furniture. The creaking and groaning echoes through the water like the world's largest, most passive-aggressive neighbour, constantly moving heavy objects around upstairs at all hours of the day and night. These sounds travel through the dense Arctic water, with a resonance that you feel in your bones before your brain processes them as audio. a constant reminder that your ceiling is made of floating ice mountains that could decide to redecorate at any moment without consulting your schedule. The shifting weight of these ice platforms presses down on the water like a cosmic blanket made of frozen concrete, and you can feel their presence even when you can't see them. It's like living in a basement apartment where the landlord is a glacier and the lease agreement is written in a language that roughly translates to survive or become fish food. The ice moves with the kind of slow inevitability usually reserved for government bureaucracy, except when it decides to move quickly, at which point it sounds like the planet is having a nervous breakdown. The vibrations from distant ice-breaking travel through the water like thunder that someone stretched out and made wet, rumbling through your small body with the authority of geological processes that don't care about your personal comfort level. These sounds settle deep in your bones like a bass line played by an orchestra of icebergs, a constant reminder that even the seemingly solid parts of your world are temporary arrangements that could be renegotiated without notice. Your vision in this underwater twilight zone continues to be about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. The light filtering down through the ice and water has been processed and reprocessed until it's basically just a suggestion of illumination, like trying to read fine print by the light of a dying phone battery. Your eyes, positioned like a prey animal that evolution clearly didn't have high expectations for, can detect movement and general shapes, but expecting them to provide detailed information is like asking a flip phone to run streaming video. The water itself has developed personality, specifically the personality of someone who works in customer service and has given up on being helpful. It's thick, resistant, and seems personally invested in making every movement cost more energy than it should. Swimming through it feels like trying to run through pudding that someone left in a freezer, except the pudding extends in every direction for thousands of miles and contains things with teeth that are bigger than your entire head. Your small body continues its crash course in Arctic thermoregulation, learning to distribute heat with the efficiency of an accountant and the desperation of someone whose heating bill is due daily in calories. Every movement is now a calculated investment, every moment of rest a strategic decision about energy conservation. Trust me, you're getting a masterclass in the economics of survival, and the tuition is paid in constant mild hypothermia and the persistent fear that you're one miscalculation away from becoming an entry in some other creature's food diary. Living beneath the ice is like being trapped in nature's most elaborate passive-aggressive relationship, where your ceiling is constantly reminding you that it could crush you at any moment, but chooses not to, mostly out of boredom rather than kindness. The ice floes above you shift and creak with the enthusiasm of someone rearranging furniture at 3 a.m, producing sounds that travel through the water like the world's most ominous elevator music. These aren't gentle, soothing ocean sounds. These are the acoustic equivalent of living under a construction site where the workers are all glaciers and they never take lunch breaks. The creaking starts as a low groan, like the planet clearing its throat before delivering some particularly bad news about your life expectancy. Then it builds into a symphony of grinding, scraping, and general structural complaint that makes you wonder if whoever designed this ecosystem had a background in horror movie sound effects. The ice moves with the kind of slow, inexorable weight that makes tectonic plates look impatient. But when it decides to shift position, it does so with all the subtlety of a freight train having an argument with a mountain. Your small body floats in this acoustic nightmare like a cork in a washing machine, feeling every vibration through the water, as if the ice floes are personally sending you updates about their structural integrity. The weight of these floating ice mountains presses down on the water with the casual authority of something that weighs approximately as much as a small country and has no intention of apologizing for the inconvenience. You can feel their presence even in the deeper water, like living under a landlord who owns several city blocks and wants to make sure you never forget it. The rumbling of distant ice-breaking sounds like nature's version of a demolition crew, except the demolition crew is the size of Manhattan and operates on geological timescales, which means they take forever to get anything done, but make an incredible amount of noise in the process. These vibrations travel through the dense Arctic water with the persistence of a bass line that someone forgot to turn off, settling deep in your chest cavity where they establish residence like the world's most unwelcome houseguest. You feel these sound waves in your bones before your brain processes them as actual noise, which is your first lesson in Arctic acoustics. Everything here is louder, more resonant, and more existentially threatening than it has any right to be. The breaking ice creates pressure waves that ripple through your small frame like someone testing the structural integrity of a building by hitting it with increasingly larger hammers. It's a constant reminder that the seemingly solid parts of your world are just slow-motion disasters with better marketing departments. Your first tentative gulp of seawater in this new acoustic environment carries the sharp bite of brine that has been seasoned with the mineral content of entire mountain ranges that got tired of being mountains and decided to try being dissolved in ocean water instead. The salt hits your tongue like a liquid argument between sodium and your taste buds, except your taste buds are clearly losing, and sodium has brought reinforcements in the form of every other mineral that ever got tired of being a rock. This taste is going to become as familiar as your own heartbeat. Every breath of water you take, every fish you'll eventually learn to catch, every moment of your existence is going to be flavoured with this overwhelming presence of dissolved geology. It's like being on a permanent diet where everything tastes like someone dissolved the periodic table in your drinking water, then added extra salt just to make sure you really understood what commitment means in the Arctic dining scene. The water itself seems to have developed opinions about your presence, flowing around your small body with the kind of casual indifference usually reserved for bureaucrats processing paperwork they don't care about. Sometimes the current pushes you gently toward the relative safety of deeper water, like a helpful suggestion from a friend who's seen too many nature documentaries. Other times it tries to nudge you toward areas where the ice overhead looks particularly unstable, like a practical joke being played by an entity with a geological sense of humour and no concept of appropriate timing. Your mother's massive bulk serves as both compass and security system in this world of shifting ice and ominous acoustics. Her presence a reassuring reminder that someone in this frozen wasteland actually knows what they're doing and has been successfully not dying for several decades. When she moves, the water around her shifts in ways that create temporary warm spots, like finding a heated parking space in a city where every other building is nice sculpture, and the heating bills are paid in calories you can't afford to spend. The ice above continues its eternal performance of sounds that make you question your life choices, with occasional special guest appearances by noises that suggest immediate structural failure and the perennial favourite, vibrations that make your skeleton feel like a tuning fork. The grinding and scraping echoes through the water like someone dragging the world's heaviest furniture across the floor of an apartment the size of the Arctic Ocean, except the furniture is made of frozen water and weighs several million tons per piece. Your developing senses start to map this acoustic landscape like a very inefficient GPS system that specializes in warnings rather than directions. The lateral line system along your body, those specialized nerve clusters that detect movement and pressure changes in the water, begins picking up the subtle vibrations that indicate whether the ice overhead is just complaining about the weather or actually planning to rearrange itself in ways that might affect your continued existence. The pressure waves from shifting ice create a constant background symphony of low-frequency rumbles that you feel more than hear, like living inside a bass speaker that's been tuned to the frequency of geological anxiety. Your small body learns to interpret these vibrations the way other creatures learn to read facial expressions, as early warning systems for events that could range from mildly inconvenient to immediately fatal, depending on your proximity to the action and your ability to swim quickly in directions that don't involve being crushed. Trust me, you're getting a comprehensive education in what it means to live in a place where the architecture is temporary, the acoustics are terrifying, and the ceiling has its own weather system that includes the possibility of sudden renovation projects involving several thousand tons of moving ice. Every sound becomes a news bulletin about the structural integrity of your world, every vibration a weather report from a meteorologist who specializes in predicting when your roof might decide to become your floor. Congratulations, you've reached the point in your aquatic career where you get to learn the fine art of catching your own food, which is like being handed a fishing rod made of bone growing out of your face and being told to figure it out while floating in liquid nitrogen. Your first hunting lesson begins with the gentle flick of your tail as you swim, which sounds simple until you realize that gentle flick in Arctic water feels more like trying to paddle through cold molasses that has strong opinions about your swimming technique and isn't afraid to share them through increased drag resistance. The water glides over your skin with the smoothness of someone trying to be helpful while secretly judging your life choices. Every movement creates ripples and currents that you're just beginning to understand are basically your signature in a liquid world where everyone else has been practicing penmanship for decades. Your sleek, torpedo-shaped body cuts through the water with what you might generously call grace, though it's more like the grace of someone learning to dance while wearing flippers and being critiqued by an audience of predators who are keeping score. Swimming with newfound coordination is like upgrading from a broken shopping cart to a slightly less broken shopping cart. Technically an improvement, but you're still not exactly winning any efficiency awards. Your flippers push through the resistant Arctic water with the enthusiasm of someone who's finally figured out which end of the hammer to hold, but still hasn't quite mastered the concept of actually hitting the nail. The water flows around your body in patterns that create tiny whirlpools and pressure changes, each one a lesson in hydrodynamics that you're learning through the trial and error method, which in this environment means that errors have consequences measured in calories you can't afford to waste. Your developing lateral line system starts picking up the faint vibrations of fish darting around you like underwater hummingbirds having anxiety attacks. These aren't the big, slow fish that would be convenient for a beginner. No, these are the aquatic equivalent of trying to catch mosquitoes with your bare hands while blindfolded and standing on a moving platform. The fish move with a kind of frantic energy usually reserved for emergency evacuations, creating pressure waves in the water that your sensitive skin detects like a biological radar system that someone installed without providing an instruction manual. The subtle waves of their movement resonate through your body like notifications from a smartphone app that specializes in telling you about opportunities you're not qualified to take advantage of yet. Each fish creates its own unique signature in the water, little pulses and eddies that your nervous system is slowly learning to interpret as food that doesn't want to be caught versus food that really doesn't want to be caught and has a good escape plan. Your skin becomes a living sonar dish, picking up vibrations that travel through the dense Arctic water like gossip in a small town, carrying information about size, speed, and general attitude toward being eaten. Your mother, demonstrating the kind of patience usually reserved for saints and kindergarten teachers, begins showing you how to use the massive ivory spike growing out of your face for something more productive than just making you look like a unicorn that took a wrong turn at the North Pole. Your tusk, all few precious inches of it at this point, feels like trying to write with a pen that's longer than your entire body and has its own gravitational field. Learning to maneuver with this thing attached to your head is like learning to drive while someone has bolted a telephone pole to your hood and told you it's a steering enhancement. The first time you attempt to actually use your tusk for hunting, it becomes clear that evolution has a sense of humor about the whole situation. You're essentially trying to spear fish with a weapon that weighs more than you do, while floating in water that makes every movement feel like you're swimming through refrigerated honey. Your tusk cuts through the water with all the precision of someone trying to perform surgery with a flagpole, creating turbulence and pressure waves that basically announce to every fish in the area that an amateur predator is operating heavy machinery without proper training. The salty tang of fresh prey when you finally manage to connect with something that's either very slow or very unlucky hits your taste buds like the flavor equivalent of winning a participation trophy. It's not exactly gourmet, more like the taste of victory mixed with seawater and the metallic undertone of something that was recently alive and had its own opinions about the food chain hierarchy. The fish you catch tastes like the ocean decided to concentrate all its mineral content into one convenient, protein-rich package that comes with complementary scales and the lingering aftertaste of someone else's survival instincts. Your jaw muscles, still learning the complex mechanics of subduing prey that doesn't want to be subdued, work with the coordination of someone trying to chew gum while solving calculus problems underwater. The sharp feeling of successfully catching your first fish vibrates through your tusk and into your skull like a biological notification system announcing mission accomplished in a language that your nervous system is still learning to speak fluently. It's a sensation that's part accomplishment, part relief, and part surprise that something you attempted actually worked despite all evidence suggesting it shouldn't have. The water around you during these hunting attempts becomes a chaos of displaced currents and confused fish, like a liquid traffic jam where everyone is trying to change lanes at once and nobody knows the rules of the road. Your movements create pressure waves that bounce off nearby ice formations and return to you as distorted echoes, providing a kind of acoustic feedback about your hunting technique that mostly suggests you need more practice and possibly some remedial courses in stealth. Trust me, learning to hunt in Arctic waters is like trying to play darts in the dark while riding a unicycle on ice. Technically possible, but requiring a level of coordination that evolution apparently expects you to figure out through repeated failure and the constant threat of starvation. Your body learns to read the water like a very slow, very cold book written in a language of pressure changes and vibrations, each page teaching you something new about the complex art of being a predator in an environment that would prefer you stick to being prey. The entire hunting experience becomes a masterclass in patience, precision, and the uncomfortable realization that being higher up on the food chain doesn't automatically make you better at your job. It just means the stakes are higher and the performance reviews are conducted by your empty stomach in real time. Welcome to the moment when you discover that being a small, relatively inexperienced narwhal in the Arctic Ocean is like being the new intern at a company, where all your co-workers are professional killers and the office policy manual was written by something with considerably more teeth than you'll ever have. Your heart starts quickening with the kind of pulse usually reserved for medical emergencies or seeing your credit card statement, because the shadows of larger creatures have begun looming in the dark water around you like uninvited guests at a party where you're both the host and the main course. The deep Arctic water, which you've been slowly learning to call home, suddenly feels less like a neighborhood and more like a hunting ground where you've accidentally wandered into the wrong zip code. The darkness that seemed merely inconvenient when you were learning to swim now takes on the quality of a very large, very liquid hiding place for things that consider you a convenient snack rather than a fellow resident of this frozen wasteland. Your electroreception, those specialized nerve clusters that detect electrical fields, starts picking up signatures that feel like someone plugging in appliances that are considerably larger and hungrier than anything you're prepared to deal with. These electrical currents travel through the water like biological Wi-Fi signals from creatures whose usernames would probably be variations on Death from Below and Meat Eater 3000. The signals feel different from the small, frantic pulses of the fish you've been learning to hunt. These are slow, powerful, deliberate electrical signatures that suggest the kind of confidence usually associated with apex predators who don't worry about their place in the food chain because they wrote the employee handbook. Your skin, now serving as a living radar system, receives these signals with all the enthusiasm of someone checking their bank account after a shopping spree. The quickening pulse of your heart becomes like a biological drum solo that you're pretty sure every predator in a 5-mile radius can hear through the water, because apparently evolution decided that when you're most in need of stealth, your cardiovascular system should start broadcasting your location like a dinner bell made of percussion instruments. Your heart pounds with the kind of rhythm usually reserved for emergency alerts, pumping blood through your system with the urgency of someone who's just realized they're in the wrong place at the wrong time, and all the exits are blocked by things with fins and attitude problems. Something massive moves nearby, and when I say massive, I mean the kind of massive that makes you recalculate your understanding of what constitutes large in an environment where even the smaller predators could use you as a toothpick. The hulking shape shifts through the water with the casual grace of something that doesn't need to hurry, because it knows everything else in the area is going to do the hurrying for it. This creature moves water like a biological bulldozer, creating pressure waves that hit your small body like notifications from a very large, very unfriendly neighbor who's just moved in next door. The displacement of water around this massive presence feels like being caught in the wake of an underwater freight train that's been given teeth and a hunting license. The pressure changes ripple through your body like someone testing the structural integrity of a small building by hitting it with increasingly larger vehicles. Your lateral line system, that network of vibration-sensitive nerves, receives these pressure waves like text messages written in a language you're still learning to read, but the basic translation seems to be, something really big is here, and it might be interested in your nutritional value. The coldness of this creature's presence feels different from the general Arctic cold you've been learning to tolerate. This is a cold that seems personal, like the temperature drop that happens when someone opens all the doors in a heated building, except the someone in this case is a predator the size of a small building, and the heated building is your personal space. This unnerving cold presses against your body like the aquatic equivalent of someone walking over your grave. If your grave was in the middle of a liquid freezer, and the someone doing the walking had their own gravitational field, your muscles start to tremble, but not from the temperature this time. This is the kind of trembling usually reserved for job interviews, first dates, and moments when you realize you've made a series of poor life choices that have led to your current predicament. The adrenaline rushing through your system feels like someone injected rocket fuel directly into your bloodstream, giving you the kind of energy boost that comes with the uncomfortable realization that you're going to need every bit of speed and agility you can muster to avoid becoming a statistic in someone else's hunting success story. The water around you seems to get colder as fear kicks your metabolism into overdrive, because apparently your body's response to mortal terror is to burn through your energy reserves like someone trying to heat a house by setting money on fire. Your small frame becomes a biological engine running on pure anxiety, consuming calories at a rate that would be impressive if it weren't so potentially fatal in an environment where every calorie counts and the vending machines are both scarce and likely to eat you if you approach them incorrectly. Swimming faster in Arctic water while terrified is like trying to run a marathon through pudding while someone chases you with a fork, except the pudding is below freezing, and the someone doing the chasing could swallow you whole without requiring condiments. Your flippers push through the resistant water with desperate efficiency, creating turbulence patterns that probably announce your location to every predator in the area like a biological GPS beacon set to panicked prey animal. Please respond immediately. The race for safety becomes a crash course in hydrodynamics under pressure, where every stroke has to count because the alternative is becoming a case study in what happens when small narwhals venture into neighborhoods where the homeowners association is run by creatures that consider catch and release to be a waste of time. Your streamlined body cuts through the water with the kind of desperation usually reserved for people trying to catch the last train home, except in this case, missing your ride means becoming someone else's dinner rather than just having to call a cab. Trust me, this is your introduction to the complex social dynamics of Arctic marine life, where the pecking order is determined by who eats whom, and your current position on that hierarchy could be generously described as somewhere between krill and emergency food supplies. The dark water that seemed mysterious and challenging when you were learning to hunt now reveals itself as a liquid apartment complex, where all your neighbors are significantly larger than you and have very different ideas about appropriate noise levels and personal property rights. After surviving your first brush with becoming someone else's lunch, you reach the point where your body finally starts figuring out this whole being a narwhal thing, which is like getting the hang of driving a car that's shaped like a torpedo, steered with a face-mounted spear, and operates exclusively in an environment that would kill most creatures in minutes. The stretching of your long, streamlined body as you learn to glide becomes less like operating broken machinery and more like piloting a biological submarine that someone designed during a particularly optimistic phase of evolution, back when they thought living in liquid nitrogen sounded like a reasonable lifestyle choice. Learning to move with ease through Arctic water is like mastering the art of graceful movement while wearing a wetsuit filled with refrigerated jello. Technically possible, but requiring the kind of coordination that suggests your nervous system has either given up on traditional physics or has developed a very sophisticated sense of humor about the whole situation. The pressure of the water against your skin starts to feel less like assault and more like a full-body massage from a masseuse who specializes in sub-zero temperatures and has strong opinions about energy conservation through proper hydrodynamics. Your body begins to understand the complex relationship between effort and efficiency in an environment where every calorie matters, and the energy budget is managed by someone who learned, accounting from watching penguins try to balance on ice floes. The water that once felt like an adversary trying to slow you down now becomes something closer to a dance partner. Still cold, still potentially lethal, but at least willing to work with you if you learn the proper steps and don't step on its metaphorical toes too often. Becoming one with the current is like finally understanding the punchline to a very long, very wet joke that evolution has been telling for millions of years. The flow of Arctic water begins to feel less like resistance and more like guidance, as if the ocean itself has decided to provide you with a liquid GPS system that runs on intuition and occasionally tries to steer you toward areas with better fish populations or away from neighborhoods where the residents have too many teeth and poor impulse control regarding smaller mammals. The subtle pull of your tusk against the water becomes a lesson in physics that nobody asked you to take, but everyone expects you to pass. This massive ivory protrusion, which started as an inconvenient dental accessory that made eating complicated and swimming awkward, slowly transforms into something resembling a useful tool, though useful is relative when you're talking about a weapon that weighs more than some cars and is permanently attached to your face with no possibility of returning it for store credit. The sensation of your tusk's weight shifting with your movement feels like learning to balance a telephone pole on your nose while riding a bicycle through a swimming pool. Technically a skill, but one that raises questions about who designed this system and whether they were entirely sober during the planning phase. The weight distribution of having several feet of solid ivory growing out of your skull requires the kind of core strength usually associated with professional athletes, except professional athletes don't typically perform while submerged in near-freezing water and surrounded by things that consider them nutritionally interesting. Your tusk cuts through the water with increasing precision, creating pressure waves and currents that become part of your navigation system, like a biological rudder that doubles as a hunting implement and social status symbol. The sensation of water flowing around this massive protrusion starts to provide information about currents, obstacles, and the general mood of the liquid environment you're trying to navigate, as if your face has sprouted its own weather station that specializes in underwater meteorology and occasionally provides commentary on fish distribution patterns. The vibration of your flippers as they push through the thick Arctic water develops into a rhythmic, repetitive pulse that settles into your bones like a biological metronome keeping time for the symphony of survival. This rhythm becomes as natural as breathing, which is fortunate because breathing in this environment requires careful scheduling and the kind of timing usually reserved for synchronized swimming competitions, except the pool is the size of an ocean and the judges all have fins and attitude problems. Your flippers learn to read the water like braille written in liquid, detecting subtle changes in temperature, salinity, and the general hostility level of your immediate surroundings. The resistance they encounter with each stroke provides feedback about everything from current direction to the proximity of ice formations, to whether that shadow moving below you is a rock formation or something with digestive preferences that include small narwhals who haven't quite figured out the neighborhood watch schedule yet. The push and pull of water against your flippers becomes a conversation between your body and the Arctic Ocean, a dialogue conducted entirely through pressure changes and the subtle art of not drowning while trying to maintain forward momentum in conditions that would challenge the swimming abilities of creatures specifically designed for aquatic excellence. Each stroke teaches you something new about the complex physics of moving efficiently through a medium that's denser than air, colder than common sense, and populated by residents who didn't sign up for the welcoming committee. Your streamlined body finally starts living up to its aerodynamic potential, cutting through the water with the kind of efficiency that suggests evolution occasionally knows what it's doing, even when the end result looks like someone crossed a dolphin with a unicorn and then relocated the entire operation to a location that most sensible creatures avoid on principle. The sleek design of your form begins to make sense as you learn to work with the water rather than against it, discovering that cooperation with your liquid environment yields better results than the previous strategy of treating every swimming session like a personal combat mission against the ocean itself. Trust me, reaching this point of coordination feels like finally getting the hang of a job that initially seem designed to kill you through a combination of exhaustion, hypothermia, and the constant stress of being surrounded by colleagues who view workplace relationships in terms of predator-prey dynamics rather than traditional team-building exercises. Your muscles develop the kind of memory that allows for efficient movement without conscious effort, freeing up mental resources for more important considerations, like not becoming lunch for something higher up on the food chain. The rhythmic pulse in your bones becomes the soundtrack to your new life as a competent Arctic marine mammal, a biological beat that coordinates your movements with the complex choreography required for survival in an environment where the margin for error is measured in heartbeats, and the performance reviews are conducted by your empty stomach and the various creatures that would prefer your stomach to remain permanently empty. Welcome to the marathon phase of your Arctic career, where swimming long distances becomes less like an adventure and more like commuting to work in a city where all the roads are made of liquid nitrogen and the traffic consists entirely of things that want to eat you. The gradual ache that develops in your muscles during these extended swimming sessions is like the biological equivalent of being stuck in a really uncomfortable chair for hours, except the chair is the entire Arctic Ocean, and getting up to stretch isn't an option because there's nowhere to stand, and taking a break means becoming someone else's snack break. Your body learns the art of long-distance endurance in an environment that treats stamina like a luxury tax, available to those who can afford it, but with interest rates that compound daily in the form of constant calorie expenditure and the persistent threat of hypothermia. The cold water numbs your extremities with the dedication of a dental anesthetic that never wears off, creating a sensation like swimming while wearing mittens made of ice cubes. Except the mittens are permanent, and the ice cubes are trying to freeze your internal organs for easier storage. As the hours stretch on during these epic swimming sessions, time becomes a relative concept, measured not in minutes or hours, but in the gradual transition from "this is uncomfortable" to "this is my life now," to "I've forgotten what it feels like to not be swimming through liquid permafrost." Your muscles settle into a rhythm that's part endurance, part stubbornness, and part the biological equivalent of someone who's too tired to quit but too committed to stop, like a marathon runner who took a wrong turn somewhere around mile 5 and ended up in a completely different climate zone. Your body finds its rhythm in this endless liquid expanse like a biological metronome that's been calibrated for survival rather than music, creating a steady cadence of movement that conserves energy while maintaining the forward progress necessary to avoid becoming a stationary target for creatures with better hunting instincts and more flexible dining schedules. The repetitive motion of swimming becomes as automatic as breathing, which is fortunate because conscious effort in this environment is a luxury you can't afford to waste on basic locomotion when your brain needs to be focused on more pressing concerns like navigation, predator avoidance, and the complex mathematics of calorie management in sub-zero conditions. The muted sound of the ocean creates a sensory experience like being inside the world's largest, coldest, most liquid library, where all the books are written in pressure waves and the librarians of various species of Arctic marine life who enforce the quiet policy through methods that don't involve overdue fines. The hum of water moving past your ears becomes a constant white noise that drowns out most other sounds, creating a sense of acoustic isolation that makes you feel simultaneously alone in the vast ocean and surrounded by invisible neighbors who might be anywhere from harmless to homicidal, depending on their species and current mood regarding small narwhals. This aquatic soundtrack provides the background music for your endurance swimming sessions, a composition that consists entirely of water displacement, your own heartbeat, and the occasional ominous creak from ice formations overhead that serve as a reminder that even your ceiling has structural integrity issues and a tendency towards sudden renovation projects. The sound creates a meditative quality that would be peaceful if it weren't for the constant underlying awareness that meditation in this environment requires keeping one eye open for things that consider contemplative narwhals to be convenient meditation snacks. The salt water seeps into your skin like a very persistent salesperson who's determined to make sure you fully understand their product, which in this case is a comprehensive lesson in what it means to live in a solution that's basically liquid geology mixed with the dissolved remains of everything that ever lived in the ocean, and then seasoned with enough sodium to make a pretzel jealous. Your skin becomes a living interface with this mineral-rich environment, absorbing trace elements and electrolytes while simultaneously losing heat at a rate that would impress an accountant if accountants specialized in thermal dynamics and energy loss in aquatic mammals. The taste of the ocean becomes so familiar that it stops registering as a flavor and starts feeling more like a permanent modification to your sensory system, as if someone has installed a saltwater filter directly into your nervous system and forgotten to mention that it comes with no removal option and a lifetime warranty that you definitely didn't sign up for. Every breath of water carries this overwhelming presence of dissolved minerals, creating a dining experience where every meal comes pre-seasoned with the entire periodic table and a side of whatever used to be mountains before they got tired of being solid and decided to try being liquid instead. Diving deeper during these extended swimming sessions introduces you to the concept of pressure as a full-time job rather than a part-time inconvenience, where the weight of water above you becomes like having a liquid ceiling made of several thousand tons of increasingly annoyed H2O molecules that want to make sure you understand exactly how much they weigh and how little they care about your personal comfort preferences. The pressure grows with each foot of depth like interest accumulating on a debt you never agreed to take on, pressing against your body with the kind of insistence usually reserved for tax collectors and people trying to sell extended warranties. Your small frame adapts to this increasing pressure with the resignation of someone who's realized that their job description has been permanently updated to include withstand crushing forces while maintaining basic biological functions in conditions that would turn most creatures into compressed organic matter. Your internal organs adjust to the pressure changes with the efficiency of a biological accordion that's been specifically designed for underwater performance art, expanding and contracting in ways that keep you functional, while the weight of the ocean above reminds you that buoyancy is more of a suggestion than a guarantee. Trust me, swimming long distances in Arctic water is like participating in an endurance sport, where the playing field is actively trying to freeze you solid. The equipment is permanently attached to your body and weighs more than most furniture, and the other participants are all creatures who view the event less as competition and more as a buffet with a self-serve policy. Your body becomes a biological machine designed for one purpose, covering vast distances in an environment that treats survival as an elective course with a very high dropout rate and no makeup exams. The endless nature of these swimming sessions teaches you that endurance in the Arctic Ocean isn't about reaching a destination. It's about accepting that movement is now your default state. Rest is a luxury you schedule around the availability of safe locations, and the journey is going to last significantly longer than any reasonable creature would consider appropriate for what should be a simple commute through your liquid neighborhood. Congratulations, you've reached Arctic winter, which is like regular winter, except designed by someone who thought regular winter wasn't quite miserable enough and decided to add several layers of existential dread and the constant threat of becoming a popsicle with fins. The piercing cold of the Arctic winter hits your skin like a personal insult from the atmosphere itself, as if the air has taken your previous complaints about temperature and decided to respond with the meteorological equivalent of, "You think that was cold? Hold my beer and watch this." When you surface for air during winter, the sensation is like sticking your head into a freezer that's been having an argument with a wind tunnel and decided to settle their differences by making everything as uncomfortable as possible for anyone foolish enough to need oxygen. The freezing air bites at your skin with the enthusiasm of something that's been waiting all year, for the opportunity to remind you that breathing is a privilege, not a right, and privileges can be revoked at any time by atmospheric conditions that don't care about your personal comfort preferences or survival requirements. The contrast between the relatively warmer water and the Arctic air creates a temperature differential that would be impressive if it weren't so personally offensive to your continued existence. Your body heat, that precious commodity you've been carefully managing and rationing like someone trying to stretch a tiny paycheck through an expensive month, gets sucked away by the air so quickly that you start to wonder if the atmosphere has been taking lessons in thermal management from professional bank robbers who specialize in heat theft. The slick, Frozen ice that coats the surface of the water creates a ceiling that's like living under a roof made of really aggressive frozen precipitation that has commitment issues and can't decide whether it wants to be solid, liquid, or something in between. That makes navigation a constant guessing game. This ice forms patterns that change daily, creating a landscape that's simultaneously beautiful and deeply irritating, like having a roommate who rearranges the furniture every night while you're trying to sleep and then acts surprised when you can't find anything in the morning. Breaking through this ice ceiling requires the kind of effort usually reserved for home improvement projects that nobody asked for but everyone has to deal with anyway. Your body crashes through the frozen surface with all the grace of someone trying to open a really stubborn jar, except the jar is the size of the Arctic Ocean, and opening it requires using your entire body as a biological can opener, while hoping that the contents don't include anything with teeth and poor impulse control regarding small mammals. The sound of ice breaking around you creates an acoustic experience like being inside the world's largest, most violent percussion instrument that's being played by someone who learned music from watching demolition crews work. Each crack and splinter echoes through the water with a kind of resonance that makes you wonder if the ice is trying to communicate something important, though the message seems to be primarily focused on how much it resents being broken and how it plans to make this inconvenience your problem rather than its problem. The shock of broken ice against your skin feels like being slapped by frozen geometry, as if someone has weaponized winter and decided to use your body as target practice for their new cold-based assault system. The ice fragments press against you with sharp edges that haven't been filed down for customer comfort, creating a sensation like swimming through a slushy made of liquid hostility and frozen resentment toward warm-blooded creatures who have the audacity to need air on a regular basis. Your breath, when you finally manage to grab some air, comes out as visible puffs of steam that immediately freeze and fall back down like snow made of your own respiratory byproducts, which is both fascinating and deeply concerning from a thermodynamics perspective. The air you exhale becomes solid almost instantly, creating ice crystals that serve as a visual reminder of just how unsuitable this environment is for creatures whose biology requires maintaining internal temperatures significantly higher than the ambient conditions. The quiet despair of hunger settles into your bones like a permanent houseguest, who doesn't contribute to rent but has strong opinions about interior decorating and meal planning. Winter in the Arctic means that food becomes scarce, with the kind of scarcity usually associated with luxury items during economic collapse, except in this case the luxury item is anything edible, and the economic collapse is being orchestrated by seasonal weather patterns that don't care about your nutritional requirements or business plan for staying alive. Your stomach begins gnawing at itself, with the dedication of someone who's been put in charge of a job they're not qualified for, but can't quit, because the consequences of resignation involve immediate termination of all biological processes. The sensation of emptiness expands through your body cavity like a biological black hole that's consuming energy, reserves you didn't know you had, and sending increasingly urgent memos to your brain about the need to find food immediately, preferably something that doesn't require extensive hunting in conditions that would challenge the survival skills of creatures specifically designed for Arctic excellence. The weight of hunger presses down on you with the same persistence as the water pressure, except this pressure comes from inside and can't be relieved by swimming to a different depth or adjusting your buoyancy. It settles into your bones like a heavy metal that's been distributed evenly throughout your skeletal system, making every movement feel like you're carrying invisible luggage packed with the accumulated weight of missed meals, and the growing realization that your calorie budget has been seriously miscalculated. Food scarcity in winter turns hunting from a skill-building exercise into a desperate treasure hunt, where the treasure keeps swimming away and the map is written in a language that consists entirely of water currents and the fading electrical signatures of prey that's gotten significantly better at not being caught. The fish that were merely challenging to hunt during warmer months have now become nearly mythical creatures, like unicorns except underwater, and edible, and protected by the natural armor of being really good at hiding in an environment that offers unlimited hiding places. Trust me, Arctic winter is like working a job where the hours get longer, the pay gets worse, the working conditions become actively hostile to human life, and the employee handbook is written entirely in terms of what you're not allowed to do if you want to avoid immediate termination. Your body becomes a biological furnace that's been tasked with maintaining operational temperature while the fuel supply has been cut to emergency rations, and the thermostat has been set by someone who believes that comfort is a character flaw and warmth is for quitters. The entire season becomes an extended lesson in the economics of survival, where every calorie is a precious currency. Every moment of warmth is a luxury that must be earned through constant effort, and every day you manage to avoid freezing solid or starving to death counts as a victory worth celebrating, assuming you have enough energy left over for celebration after covering the basic requirements of not dying. Welcome to the moment when you discover that territorial disputes in the Arctic Ocean are settled through methods that make professional wrestling look like a polite disagreement over parking spaces, because apparently evolution decided that the best way to resolve property conflicts between narwhals is through ritualized combat, using weapons that are permanently attached to your face and impossible to put down when things get out of hand. Your tusk, that massive ivory spear that's been growing out of your skull like a biological sword that someone forgot to give you a scabbard for, suddenly becomes less of a hunting tool and more of a medieval jousting lance in a tournament where all the participants are aquatic, and the prize is the right to exist in a particular patch of freezing ocean that probably isn't worth fighting over in the first place. The sharp scrape of tusks against tusks creates a sound that's like fingernails on a chalkboard, except the chalkboard is made of solid ivory, and the fingernails are several feet long and attached to creatures who have strong opinions about personal space and property rights, in an environment where property consists entirely of liquid real estate that moves around constantly anyway. This grinding, scraping symphony fills your ears with the kind of noise usually reserved for construction sites where all the workers are marine mammals, and the building materials consist entirely of weaponized dental work that's grown to ridiculous proportions. The sound of grinding bone fills the water around you, like an underwater dental procedure being performed by someone who learned orthodontics from watching demolition crews work, creating acoustic vibrations that travel through the Arctic water, with the resonance of really expensive musical instruments being played by musicians who specialize in the aggressive interpretation of classical compositions. The grinding echoes through your skull with the kind of intimacy usually reserved for dental work, except in this case the dentist is another narwhal, and the procedure involves determining who gets to keep their current address. Fighting to hold your ground in a territorial dispute feels like participating in a sport that was invented by someone who thought regular competitive activities weren't dangerous enough, and needed to add the element of combat, using facial weapons in an environment where losing your balance could result in drowning, being eaten, or both simultaneously. The struggle requires the kind of strength and coordination usually associated with professional athletes, except professional athletes don't typically perform while floating in near-freezing water and using equipment that's been surgically attached to their heads, without the possibility of upgrades or returns. The jolt of impact when your tusk connects with your opponent's creates a shockwave that travels from the point of contact straight through your skull and down your spine, like someone testing the structural integrity of your skeletal system using methods borrowed from crash test scenarios. This impact reverberates through your body with the kind of force that makes you question whether whoever designed narwhal anatomy had any background in engineering, or if they just thought it would be interesting to see what happened when you gave a marine mammal a built-in weapon system and turned them loose in an environment where conflict resolution involves jousting. The sting of pressure from tusk to tusk combat vibrates through your neck vertebrae like a biological tuning fork that's been struck with excessive enthusiasm, sending waves of sensation through your nervous system that serve as a constant reminder that your head is now being used as the primary interface in a negotiation process that doesn't involve much actual negotiation. The pressure builds and releases in patterns that correspond to the rhythm of combat, creating a percussion section in the symphony of territorial dispute that's being performed entirely through bone-on-bone percussion. Your spine absorbs these impacts like a biological shock absorber that's been designed for normal swimming activities, but is now being tested under combat conditions that exceed the manufacturer's warranty, creating a sensation like someone is playing your vertebrae like a xylophone made of calcium and cartilage. Each collision sends reverberations through your skeletal system that remind you that tusks were probably not originally intended for use as medieval weapons. But evolution apparently had other plans and didn't consult your comfort preferences during the design phase. The rush of blood pounding in your ears during the escalation of combat creates an internal soundtrack that drowns out most other sounds, like having a biological drum solo performed inside your cardiovascular system by someone who learned rhythm from listening to construction equipment operate underwater. Your heart rate increases to levels usually associated with medical emergencies or extreme sports, pumping blood through your system with the kind of urgency typically reserved for situations where immediate action is required to prevent immediate termination of biological processes. The heat of exertion builds in your muscles despite the cold water surrounding you, creating a temperature contrast that makes you feel like a biological furnace that's been dropped into a swimming pool filled with liquid nitrogen. Your body generates heat through the intense physical activity of combat, while simultaneously losing that heat to the Arctic environment, creating an energy management challenge that would impress an efficiency expert if efficiency experts specialized in the thermal dynamics of underwater combat between creatures with built-in weapons systems. Your muscles work overtime to maintain position and leverage in this aquatic wrestling match, burning through energy reserves like someone trying to heat a house by setting money on fire while all the windows are open during a blizzard. The exhaustion builds in layers, starting with the obvious fatigue of using facial weapons in combat and expanding to include the more subtle energy drain of maintaining buoyancy and position while engaging in activities that your body recognizes as significantly outside normal operational parameters. Trust me, territorial combat in Arctic waters is like participating in a really violent home improvement project, where the tools are permanently attached to your body. The worksite is a liquid environment that's actively trying to kill you through hypothermia, and the project completion criteria involve convincing another creature with identical equipment that they should find a different neighborhood to call home. The entire experience becomes a masterclass in conflict resolution through methods that would be illegal in most civilized societies, but are apparently standard operating procedure in the real estate market of the Arctic Ocean. The battle continues until one participant decides that the disputed territory isn't worth the medical bills and ongoing maintenance costs of continued combat, leading to the kind of graceful retreat usually associated with strategic military withdrawals, except performed by creatures whose primary qualifications for warfare include having really long teeth and excellent swimming abilities in conditions that would challenge professional Arctic explorers. After surviving your introduction to narwhal combat sports, you settle into what can generously be called the routine phase of your Arctic career, which is like having a job where every day involves the same basic tasks, but the workplace is actively trying to kill you, and your co-workers are all creatures with competing interests in your continued existence. The steady, repetitive motion of swimming becomes as automatic as breathing, except breathing requires surfacing through ice, and swimming requires navigating through liquid that's colder than most people's freezers and populated by neighbors who view social interaction primarily through the lens of predator-prey relationships. Your flippers develop a rhythm that's part muscle memory, part survival instinct, and part the biological equivalent of someone who's accepted that their commute involves traveling through an environment where public transportation consists entirely of your own propulsion system and the traffic includes things with teeth. The push through cold water becomes as natural as walking, if walking required full body coordination in 3 dimensions while maintaining precise buoyancy control and keeping one eye open for creatures who consider pedestrians to be mobile snack dispensers. The motion settles into your bones like a biological metronome that's been calibrated for survival rather than music, creating a steady cadence that conserves energy while maintaining the forward progress necessary to avoid becoming a stationary target in an environment where being stationary is basically the same as putting up a sign that says, "Buffet open, please form an orderly line." Your body learns to swim with the kind of efficiency usually associated with well-designed machinery, except this machinery is made of flesh and bone and requires constant fuel in the form of fish that don't want to be fuel. Swimming becomes like clockwork if clockwork operated underwater at temperatures that would make ice cubes complain about the working conditions, and required the clock to catch its own oil and perform regular maintenance, while moving through an environment where the warranty expired millions of years ago, and the customer service consists entirely of natural selection. Your movements develop the kind of precision that comes from understanding that wasted motion equals wasted energy, and wasted energy equals becoming a case study in what happens when biological systems run out of fuel in an environment that doesn't offer roadside assistance. The repetitive nature of this aquatic commute creates a meditative quality that would be peaceful if it weren't for the constant underlying awareness that meditation in the Arctic Ocean requires keeping most of your attention focused on not becoming someone else's lunch, while the remaining attention handles the complex task of swimming efficiently through liquid that has the consistency of cold syrup and the temperature of liquid nitrogen. Your mind learns to process the rhythm of swimming like a biological autopilot system, freeing up mental resources for more pressing concerns like navigation, predator detection, and the ongoing mathematics of calorie management in an environment where the cost of living is measured in constant energy expenditure. The water flows around your streamlined body in patterns that become as familiar as the sound of your own heartbeat, creating pressure waves and turbulence signatures that you learn to read like a very wet, very cold newspaper that specializes in reporting on current events in the immediate vicinity of your fins. Your skin becomes a living interface with the liquid environment, detecting subtle changes in temperature, salinity, and the general hostility level of your surroundings, with the sensitivity of equipment that's been calibrated for survival rather than comfort. Finding a rich feeding ground becomes the aquatic equivalent of discovering a really good restaurant in a neighborhood where most of the establishments specialize in serving customers rather than serving food to customers, and the customers they serve are typically smaller marine mammals who made poor navigation choices. The soft flutter of your tail as you approach these productive areas creates movements that you hope announce your presence as a legitimate hunting party, rather than an easy target for creatures with better hunting credentials and more flexible dietary requirements. Your descent toward feeding areas involves the kind of careful approach usually associated with diplomatic missions to hostile territories, where the goal is to accomplish your objectives without triggering any international incidents or becoming the subject of international incidents yourself. The schools of fish that represent your target demographic move with the kind of coordination that suggests they've been taking lessons in evasive maneuvers from professional escape artists, creating hunting challenges that require precision timing and the ability to predict the behavior of creatures whose primary life skill is not being caught by things like you. The peaceful sense of stillness that settles in your bones during rest periods between hunts feels like the biological equivalent of finally finding a comfortable position in a chair that's made entirely of liquid nitrogen and has no back support, armrests, or any other features typically associated with furniture designed for comfort. This stillness represents the closest thing to relaxation available in an environment where true relaxation would be immediately fatal, and the definition of peaceful has been adjusted to mean not currently being chased by something with more teeth than you have. The gentle rocking of the water against your body during these rest periods provides a sensation like being cradled by someone who specializes in therapeutic massage but works exclusively with clients who need to maintain constant vigilance against becoming massage therapy for creatures higher up on the food chain. The motion of the Arctic waters creates a rhythm that's simultaneously soothing and ominous, like being rocked to sleep by a babysitter who might eat you if you fall too soundly asleep and stop paying attention to your surroundings. Trust me, the endless cycle of swimming, hunting, and brief periods of what passes for rest in the Arctic Ocean creates a lifestyle that's like working a job where the commute is dangerous, the office is trying to freeze you solid, your co-workers might eat you, and the retirement plan consists entirely of hoping you can do this long enough to pass the responsibility on to the next generation before something with bigger teeth decides you've been in the same position long enough, and it's time for some organizational restructuring. This routine becomes the foundation of your existence, a biological schedule that operates according to the rhythms of survival rather than convenience, where every day is basically the same day repeated with minor variations in weather, food availability, and the specific types of mortal danger you encounter, while trying to maintain your position in an ecosystem that treats stability as a temporary condition and comfort as a sign of insufficient vigilance. Congratulations, you've reached sexual maturity in the Arctic Ocean, which is like getting a promotion at a job where the new responsibilities include finding a mate in an environment where dating involves swimming vast distances through liquid nitrogen to locate someone who's compatible with your lifestyle of constant hypothermia and perpetual hunting for scarce food resources. The stirring of primal urges deep within your body feels like someone has installed a biological alarm clock that's been set to go off at the most inconvenient possible time, creating sensations that are part instinct, part hormonal chaos, and part the evolutionary equivalent of receiving a work assignment that you didn't apply for but can't refuse without facing immediate termination from the gene pool. The sensation of warmth flooding your body as mating instincts take over is like having an internal heating system that's been activated by remote control, except the person operating the remote control is millions of years of evolutionary programming, and they don't care about your personal schedule or whether you feel prepared for the responsibilities that come with biological imperatives. This warmth spreads through your system with a kind of intensity usually associated with medical conditions, creating a heat that manages to make itself felt even in Arctic waters that are cold enough to freeze the enthusiasm out of most biological processes. The desire to find a mate becomes as undeniable as the need to breathe or eat, except considerably more complicated, because breathing and eating don't require you to locate another creature with compatible reproductive equipment and convince them that spending time with you in an environment that's actively trying to kill both of you sounds like a reasonable basis for starting a relationship. This urge settles into your bones like a biological GPS system that's been programmed with only one destination and doesn't offer alternative routes or the option to cancel the trip and stay home. The deep primal nature of these reproductive instincts feels like having your body hijacked by software that was written millions of years ago and never updated to account for modern conveniences like personal choice, or the option to delay major life decisions until you feel more financially and emotionally prepared for the responsibilities involved. Your biological systems respond to these urges with the kind of single-minded determination usually reserved for emergency situations, treating reproduction like a survival mission that takes priority over minor concerns like personal comfort or rational decision-making. The sound of distant calls echoing through the water creates an acoustic dating service that operates on frequencies designed to travel through Arctic Ocean water with the efficiency of a really expensive long-distance phone service, except the phone calls are being made by creatures whose idea of romantic conversation consists entirely of low-frequency vocalizations that roughly translate to, "I am reproductively available and have survived long enough to prove my genetic fitness." These calls carry through the water like underwater advertisements for potential mates, creating a biological classified section where everyone is looking for someone with compatible survival skills and similar tolerance for living conditions that would violate most housing codes. The low vibrations of mating calls reach you through the water with the kind of resonance that you feel in your chest before your brain processes them as sound, like being at a concert where all the performers are marine mammals, and the music consists entirely of biological announcements about reproductive availability and territorial boundaries. These vibrations travel through the dense Arctic water with the persistence of someone trying to get your attention about something they consider extremely important, which in this case is the continuation of your species in an environment where species continuation requires a level of commitment that would impress relationship counselors. Your body responds to these distant mating calls with the enthusiasm of someone who's been waiting for an important phone call and finally hears the ring. Except the phone call involves traveling potentially hundreds of miles through hostile territory to meet someone you've never seen for the purpose of engaging in biological processes that your ancestors have been successfully completing for millions of years without leaving detailed instruction manuals. The familiar tug of reproductive instinct pulls at your consciousness like someone has installed biological puppet strings that are being operated by evolutionary programming with a very specific agenda. Swimming toward the mating grounds feels like commuting to the most important job interview of your life, except the interview involves demonstrating your fitness for genetic contribution to future generations, and the commute requires traveling through an environment where the other applicants might try to eat you if they decide you represent more value as a meal than as a potential mate. The water around you grows warmer with the presence of other narwhals who have received similar biological job assignments, creating temperature gradients that feel like approaching a really large, really cold conference room where everyone is attending the same mandatory meeting about species perpetuation. The excitement in every movement as you approach these reproductive gathering areas creates a sensation like having your entire nervous system operating on espresso, giving you energy levels that would be impressive if they weren't being directed toward activities that evolution considers more important than your personal energy conservation strategies. Your muscles respond to the anticipation of mating opportunities with the kind of coordination usually associated with athletic performance, except the sport you're preparing for involves convincing another creature to participate in biological processes while floating in water that's cold enough to make ice cubes complain about working conditions. Trust me, the call of reproductive duty in the Arctic Ocean is like receiving a job assignment where the work location is hostile to life. The other employees might be competitors for the same position. The benefits package includes the opportunity to pass your genes onto creatures who will face identical working conditions, and the entire process requires swimming vast distances through liquid nitrogen while maintaining the kind of optimism usually associated with people who believe that starting a family in a post-apocalyptic wasteland sounds like a reasonable life choice. The entire mating migration becomes a masterclass in biological priorities, where the drive to reproduce overrides rational considerations like personal safety, energy conservation, and the uncomfortable reality that you're about to engage in intimate activities with someone you've never met in an environment where privacy consists of finding a patch of Arctic Ocean that's temporarily unoccupied by creatures with predatory interests in small marine mammals who are distracted by romantic considerations. Welcome to the courtship phase of narwhal romance, which is like participating in a dating show where all the contestants are equipped with facial weapons and the dating activities take place in an environment that would be considered a war crime if it were used as a prison. The sharp surge of energy that courses through your body as you begin courting a potential mate feels like someone has plugged you into a biological power grid that's been designed to provide maximum performance output while simultaneously draining your energy reserves at a rate that would impress utility. Companies, if they specialized in organic fuel consumption rather than electricity distribution. Displaying your tusk during courtship rituals is like trying to impress someone by showing off your most expensive possession, except your most expensive possession is permanently attached to your face, weighs more than most furniture, and has the potential to accidentally injure the person you're trying to impress if you miscalculate the distance during romantic gestures. The weight of your tusk shifts with every movement, like carrying a really awkward briefcase that you can never set down, and that everyone expects you to use as both a tool and a fashion statement in social situations where first impressions matter significantly more than usual, because the dating pool consists of creatures who live in liquid nitrogen and have very specific standards for mate selection. Your body tenses as you maneuver through the complex choreography of narwhal courtship, which involves a series of movements that are part dance, part combat demonstration, and part the aquatic equivalent of a job interview, where you're simultaneously the applicant and the interviewer, and the position you're applying for is genetic contributor to the next generation of creatures who will face identical survival challenges in an environment that shows no signs of becoming more hospitable to life. Every gesture requires the kind of precision usually associated with surgical procedures, except the surgery is being performed underwater by someone whose primary qualification is not having died yet. The feeling of your tusk's weight shifting with every courtship movement creates a sensation like trying to conduct an orchestra while wearing a really heavy hat that extends several feet in front of your face and occasionally gets caught on things, making smooth romantic gestures significantly more challenging than they appear in the nature documentaries that make this whole process look graceful and natural, rather than like an exercise in precision equipment handling during emotionally charged social situations. The balance required to move elegantly while carrying this much ivory on your head involves the kind of core strength usually associated with professional athletes. Except professional athletes don't typically perform their sport while floating in near-freezing water and trying to make a good impression on someone who might swim away if they decide your tusk handling skills don't meet their standards. The rhythmic pulse of your body during mating activities feels like having your cardiovascular system reprogrammed to operate at performance levels that would be concerning if they weren't specifically designed by millions of years of evolution to facilitate the complex biological processes required for species continuation in conditions that would challenge the reproductive capabilities of creatures specifically designed for excellence in hostile environments. Your heart pounds with a kind of intensity usually reserved for medical emergencies, pumping blood through your system with the urgency of someone who's realized that this might be the only opportunity for genetic contribution they get this season. The water swirls around both of you during these intimate moments, creating currents and pressure patterns that feel like being inside a really large, really cold washing machine that's been set to a cycle specifically designed for the delicate handling of reproductive activities between marine mammals with built-in weapons systems. The displaced water creates a sensation like being embraced by the ocean itself, except the ocean is below freezing and has strong opinions about energy efficiency during biological processes that require significant calorie expenditure at a time when food resources are already stretched thin. Your every movement becomes an extension of instinct that's been refined over millions of years of evolution, creating a coordination between mind and body that would be impressive if it weren't happening in an environment where a single miscalculation could result in injury, hypothermia, or becoming an easy target for predators who specialize in hunting distracted marine mammals during vulnerable moments. The biological programming that drives these behaviors operates with the kind of single-minded determination usually associated with emergency response systems, treating reproduction as the most important job you'll ever have, even though nobody provided training materials or performance guidelines. Trust me, the entire mating process in Arctic waters is like participating in the world's most important dance competition, where the dance floor is made of liquid nitrogen, the music is provided by your own cardiovascular system operating at maximum capacity, and the judges are millions of years of evolutionary pressure that have very specific expectations about performance standards, and absolutely no patience for creatures who can't maintain rhythm while managing facial weaponry in sub-zero conditions. The aching exhaustion that follows mating feels like someone has drained your biological battery to approximately 3% power, while simultaneously installing new software that requires significant system resources to operate properly, leaving you with just enough energy to float in the Arctic water while your body begins the complex process of recovery from activities that evolution considers more important than your personal comfort preferences or energy conservation strategies. Your muscles feel like they've been used for construction work in an environment where all the building materials are heavier than they should be, and the construction site is actively trying to freeze the workers solid. The cold presses in around you with renewed intensity as your body temperature regulation system struggles to maintain operational parameters while processing the after effects of reproductive activities that require energy expenditure levels typically associated with emergency situations or really enthusiastic construction projects. Your spent body floats in the water like a biological life raft that's been used for purposes beyond its original design specifications, while your heart continues beating with the anticipation of potential new life and the uncomfortable realization that successful mating means you're now responsible for contributing to the next generation of creatures who will face identical challenges in an environment that shows no signs of improvement in working conditions or management policies. Welcome to the middle management phase of your Arctic career, where you get promoted from creature trying not to die to creature responsible for keeping smaller creatures from dying, which is like being given a supervisory position at a company where all the employees are completely inexperienced. The workplace is actively hostile to life, and the employee manual consists entirely of millions of years of evolutionary trial and error, with no written documentation or customer service department to call when things go wrong. The deep, resonating sense of responsibility that settles in your chest as you watch over your young feels like someone has installed a biological alarm system that never turns off and is calibrated to detect every possible threat to creatures who are even less qualified for Arctic survival than you were when you started this job. Your protective instincts kick in with the kind of intensity usually reserved for security systems at high-value facilities, except in this case, the high-value facility is a small narwhal who doesn't understand that the Arctic Ocean is essentially a liquid minefield, populated by creatures who view inexperienced marine mammals as convenient snack options rather than colleagues deserving of workplace courtesy. The weight of these protective responsibilities presses down on your consciousness like carrying a really heavy backpack filled with anxiety and the constant awareness that everything in your environment poses a potential threat to something you're now biologically programmed to keep safe. Watching over your young requires the kind of vigilance usually associated with air traffic controllers or people operating heavy machinery in environments where a single mistake could result in catastrophic failure, except your heavy machinery is your own body, and the catastrophic failure involves losing a small creature who trusts you to know what you're doing despite the fact that you're still figuring out this whole survival thing yourself. Your senses operate at heightened alert levels, processing information about water temperature, current patterns, ice conditions, and the general threat assessment of every shadow, sound, and electrical signature in your immediate vicinity. The feeling of your body slowly wearing down as age begins to assert itself creates a sensation like owning a really expensive piece of equipment that's been operating under warranty-voiding conditions for decades and is now starting to require more frequent maintenance and showing signs that the manufacturer's projected lifespan might have been optimistic. Your joints begin aching with the kind of persistent discomfort usually associated with furniture that's been assembled incorrectly and used for purposes beyond its design specifications, except the furniture is your skeleton, and the incorrect assembly was handled by evolution millions of years ago, with no possibility of returns or exchanges. Each movement starts requiring more conscious effort as your body transitions from the automatic efficiency of youth to the more deliberate coordination of experience, like driving a car that's developed personality quirks and requires specific techniques to start properly and maintain optimal performance. Your muscles respond to commands with the kind of slight delay usually associated with computer systems that are running too many programs simultaneously and need a moment to process each request before execution. Your tusk, that massive ivory protrusion that's been growing throughout your entire life like a really slow, really expensive dental procedure that nobody can afford to complete, now feels heavier than it once did, creating a weight distribution challenge that requires constant adjustment and the kind of core strength that becomes more difficult to maintain as your biological warranty expires and your body starts operating under extended coverage that doesn't include all the original features. The sensation of carrying this much ivory on your head evolves from a manageable inconvenience to a constant reminder that aging in the Arctic Ocean involves not just the usual deterioration of biological systems, but also the ongoing challenge of managing equipment that continues growing even as your ability to handle it efficiently begins to decline. The quiet moments spent with your young provide some compensation for the increasing demands of maintenance and operation of an aging biological system, their soft bodies nestling against you with a kind of trust usually reserved for creatures who haven't yet learned to properly assess risk or understand that their caregiver is essentially making things up as they go along and hoping that experience and instinct will compensate for the lack of formal training in marine mammal childcare in hostile environments. Their movements against your skin create vibrations that feel like small, warm reminders that your difficult job in this frozen wasteland has produced something positive, even though that positive result now requires even more energy and vigilance to maintain. The tender sensation of their presence against you becomes like having a living, breathing reminder that the exhausting routine of Arctic survival has a purpose beyond just personal continuation, though this purpose comes with additional responsibilities that make an already challenging lifestyle significantly more complicated and energy-intensive. Their small bodies generate warmth that you can feel through the cold water, creating localized temperature variations that serve as biological heating systems powered by creatures who don't yet understand that heat generation in the Arctic Ocean is a luxury that must be carefully managed and conserved. Trust me, the transition from survival-focused young adult to responsibility-loaded parent in Arctic waters is like getting promoted from an entry-level position where your main job was not dying to middle management, where you're responsible for keeping other creatures from dying while simultaneously managing your own increasing maintenance requirements and the uncomfortable realization that your body's performance warranty has expired and all future operation will be conducted under the biological equivalent of extended coverage, with increasing deductibles and more frequent service requirements. The combination of aging joints, growing tusks, and dependent offspring creates a lifestyle that's like trying to maintain a really expensive, high-maintenance vehicle while simultaneously operating a daycare center in an environment where both the vehicle and the children are constantly at risk from external threats that require immediate response capabilities and energy reserves that are becoming more difficult to maintain as your biological systems transition from their peak performance years to the extended operation phase, where everything takes more effort and nothing works quite as smoothly as it used to. Congratulations! You've reached the senior citizen phase of your Arctic career, where your body decides that all those years of operating in conditions that would violate most workplace safety regulations have finally accumulated enough wear and tear to start filing formal complaints through your musculoskeletal system on a daily basis. The lethargy that settles into your muscles feels like someone has replaced your biological battery with one of those cheap knockoff versions that holds about 30% of the original charge and takes twice as long to power up basic functions like swimming, breathing, and maintaining consciousness in an environment that's still actively trying to kill you despite your decades of loyal service to the ecosystem. Your muscles respond to commands with the enthusiasm of employees who've been working overtime for 40 years without a vacation and have recently discovered that their retirement plan consists entirely of keep working until something eats you or you freeze solid, whichever comes first. The cold water that once felt merely hostile now feels like a personal vendetta from the Arctic Ocean, as if the liquid environment has been keeping a detailed record of every complaint you've ever had about working conditions and has decided that your golden years are the perfect time to address all of them, simultaneously through increased thermal assault and reduced mobility options. The effort required to move through water that you once navigated with reasonable efficiency now feels like trying to swim through cold pudding that's been mixed with concrete and seasoned with the accumulated resentment of every fish you've ever caught during your decades-long career as an Arctic predator. Each stroke requires the kind of conscious effort usually reserved for complex mathematical calculations, as if your brain now needs to manually operate systems that used to run on biological autopilot but have been downgraded to manual control due to budget cuts in your nervous system's operational efficiency department. Swimming through the Arctic water with aging muscles creates a sensation like operating heavy machinery that's been in continuous use since the warranty expired and is now held together primarily through habit and the stubborn refusal to admit that replacement parts are no longer available for your particular model of marine mammal. The resistance of the water feels more pronounced now, as if the ocean has decided that you've had enough easy swimming for one lifetime, and it's time to make every movement a negotiation between your diminished physical capabilities and the unchanging demands of an environment that doesn't offer senior discounts or handicap accessibility. The quiet dimming of your vision transforms your underwater world into something like trying to navigate through a really expensive camera that someone has smeared with petroleum jelly and then submerged in liquid nitrogen, creating visual conditions that would challenge creatures with perfect eyesight and excellent depth perception, let alone aging narwhals whose eyes have been processing dim underwater light for decades and are now operating under extended warranty conditions with increasingly frequent service interruptions. The sharpness that once allowed you to distinguish between food and potential threats now operates more like a biological suggestion system that provides general impressions about movement and shape without committing to specific details about size, distance, or intentions regarding your continued existence. Your senses, those biological monitoring systems that once provided detailed reports about your immediate environment, now deliver information with the reliability of really old computer equipment that occasionally crashes and requires manual restart procedures that you're not entirely sure how to perform. The dulling occurs gradually, like a photograph that's been left in sunlight too long and is slowly losing contrast and definition, making every shadow a potential predator and every current change a possible threat that requires energy expenditure you can less afford to waste on false alarms and reconnaissance missions. The dark water around you becomes less distinct, not just because of failing eyesight, but also because your brain's processing power for environmental data has been gradually reassigned to more pressing concerns like maintaining basic life support functions and operating increasingly unreliable biological systems that require more conscious oversight as their automatic functions begin experiencing the kind of technical difficulties usually associated with equipment that's been operating beyond its recommended service life in conditions that exceed manufacturer specifications. Trust me, the weight of your tusk as it drags through the water now feels like carrying a piece of furniture that was custom designed by someone who thought that aging marine mammals needed additional challenges to keep life interesting and prevent them from getting too comfortable with their senior status in the Arctic ecosystem. This once proud extension of your identity, that massive ivory spear that served as hunting tool, social status symbol and conversation starter during your productive years, now operates more like a really expensive anchor that's permanently attached to your head and requires constant energy expenditure just to prevent it from dragging you toward the ocean floor. The tusk that once cut through water with precision now moves through the liquid environment with the grace of someone trying to steer a canoe using a telephone pole, creating turbulence patterns that announce your location to every creature in the area, while simultaneously making every movement require the kind of planning usually associated with complex engineering projects. Every stroke becomes a calculation involving weight distribution, energy conservation, and the uncomfortable realization that the weapon system you've been carrying your entire life has transformed from an asset into a liability that evolution apparently forgot to include an opt-out clause for when you reach the point where maintenance costs exceed operational benefits. The burden of carrying this much ivory during your declining years creates a lifestyle that's like being assigned to operate heavy equipment that you can never put down, clock out from, or request reassignment from, while simultaneously dealing with the normal challenges of aging in an environment where retirement planning consists entirely of hoping you can maintain basic biological functions long enough to see another spring, assuming spring still happens and the ice doesn't decide to make your particular patch of Arctic Ocean uninhabitable before you finish whatever it is that aging narwhals are supposed to accomplish besides serving as an example to younger creatures about what happens when you successfully avoid being eaten for several decades. Welcome to what you might generously call the final performance review of your Arctic career, where your body has decided that decades of operating in conditions that would be considered cruel and unusual punishment for most life forms have earned you the privilege of experiencing systematic failure of all major biological systems while still being expected to maintain basic survival functions in an environment that hasn't gotten any more hospitable during your tenure as a professional Arctic marine mammal. The fading warmth of your body as you struggle to maintain the energy necessary for swimming feels like someone has been gradually turning down the thermostat in a house where all the windows are permanently open and the heating system was designed by someone who thought that warmth was a character flaw rather than a biological necessity. Your internal temperature regulation system, that biological furnace that's been working overtime for decades to keep you functional in liquid nitrogen conditions, now operates with the efficiency of a space heater that's been dropped in a swimming pool and expected to warm an entire warehouse. The water around you doesn't just feel cold anymore, it feels like a personal enemy that's been waiting patiently for your defenses to weaken so it can finally complete its decades-long project of turning you into a really large, really expensive ice sculpture with tusks and a disappointed expression. Swimming with a failing biological heating system creates a sensation like trying to operate heavy machinery while someone slowly drains the fuel tank and replaces the fuel with something that burns less efficiently and produces more smoke than actual heat. Every stroke through the Arctic water now costs significantly more energy than you can afford to spend, creating an economic crisis in your personal energy budget that would be concerning if it weren't happening to a creature whose retirement plan consists entirely of hoping to avoid becoming someone else's lunch before complete system failure occurs. The sense of vulnerability that washes over you feels like finally understanding that you're operating equipment that's been recalled by the manufacturer, but there's no customer service department to contact, and no replacement parts available for your particular model of aging narwhal in an environment where technical support consists entirely of natural selection and the customer satisfaction guarantee expired approximately 30 years ago when you first started showing signs that your warranty period was coming to an end. Your heart, that biological pump that's been working without vacation time or sick days for 4 decades in conditions that would violate most industrial safety regulations, now operates with the irregular rhythm of machinery that's been pushed beyond its design specifications and is starting to develop the kind of personality quirks usually associated with equipment that needs more maintenance than its operational value can justify. The dull throb in your chest feels like having a really important piece of equipment that's developed a persistent fault that's not quite serious enough to cause immediate failure, but concerning enough to make you wonder how much longer the warranty extension is going to cover basic operational requirements. Each heartbeat now requires more conscious effort, as if your cardiovascular system has been downgraded from automatic operation to manual control, and nobody provided the instruction manual for hand cranking your own circulation while simultaneously trying to swim through water that's actively attempting to freeze your blood into a biological slushy. The slowing of your heart rate creates a sensation like listening to music that's gradually being played at slower and slower speeds until you start to question whether the song is actually ending or if the record player is just giving up on the whole project. The vibrations of the water around you feel weaker and more distant with each passing moment, as if someone has been gradually turning down the volume on your sensory input systems and replacing your high-definition environmental awareness with the biological equivalent of a really old television that only picks up a few channels, and those are mostly static, with occasional glimpses of something that might be important information about your immediate surroundings, but could also just be interference from cosmic background radiation. Trust me, the sensation of your biological monitoring systems going offline one by one is like watching the lights go out in a really expensive office building where you've been working the night shift for decades and suddenly realizing that you're the only person left in the building and nobody told you where the emergency exits are located or whether the building management has any contingency plans for situations where the primary life support systems start experiencing cascading failures during normal business hours. Something swimming nearby creates pressure waves in the water that your failing sensory systems detect like whispered conversations in a language you used to speak fluently but can no longer quite translate, leaving you with the general impression that there's movement in your vicinity, but no reliable information about size, distance, intentions, or whether this represents an opportunity for social interaction or the final item on someone else's to-do list that involves cleaning up loose ends in the local ecosystem. The presence feels like a shadow at the edge of your awareness, existing in that uncomfortable space between definitely there and possibly imagined by a brain that's operating on reduced power and maybe filling in gaps in sensory data with creative interpretation. The shifting of water around this nearby presence reminds you that the world continues to operate according to its original specifications, even as your ability to participate in normal ecosystem activities becomes increasingly theoretical rather than practical. The vibrations create patterns that your nervous system recognizes as significant, but can no longer process with the kind of detail necessary for making informed decisions about whether this development requires immediate action, careful observation, or just accepting that your role in the Arctic marine ecosystem has transitioned from active participant to environmental feature that occasionally moves and makes soft splashing sounds. The reminder that life continues around you while your own biological systems prepare for final shutdown creates a sensation like being a spectator at a really long sporting event, where you used to be one of the players but have been moved to the bench and then gradually transitioned to inactive status, while the game continues with a full roster of creatures who are still operating under their original biological warranties and haven't yet reached the extended coverage phase, where everything requires more effort and most functions come with disclaimers about reduced performance capabilities. Well, here's the part where your biological lease on Arctic real estate finally expires and the landlord comes to collect the keys, which in this case means your muscles give up their decades-long struggle against physics and decide that floating is a much more reasonable career choice than swimming through liquid nitrogen while carrying a massive ivory telephone pole attached to your face. The final sinking feeling in your body arrives like the world's most polite eviction notice, informing your consciousness that your occupancy of this particular narwhal-shaped apartment is being terminated due to non-payment of the increasingly expensive rent that life charges for continued operation in an environment designed by someone who clearly had strong opinions about making survival as inconvenient as possible. Your muscles relax with the kind of relief usually associated with finally putting down really heavy luggage after a very long trip, except the luggage has been your entire skeletal and muscular system, and the trip has lasted for 40-some years through conditions that would make professional Arctic explorers file complaints with their insurance companies. The sensation of your body becoming still feels like the biological equivalent of a really expensive machine finally being allowed to power down after decades of continuous operation in conditions that voided the warranty before you were even fully assembled in your mother's womb. The water around you transforms from adversary to something approaching neutral party, no longer the liquid enemy that's been trying to freeze you solid for your entire adult life, but more like a really large, really cold blanket that someone has finally agreed to share after spending decades hogging all the covers during the world's longest, most uncomfortable sleepover. The Arctic Ocean, which has been your workplace, your home, your dining room, and your constant source of minor to moderate hypothermia, now cradles you with the kind of indifference that passes for gentleness in an environment where actual warmth has always been more of a theoretical concept than a practical reality. The gentle rocking motion of the water feels like being in a really enormous, really slow washing machine that's been set to the delicate cycle and filled with liquid that's only slightly warmer than absolute zero, creating a sensation that's simultaneously soothing and deeply concerning from a thermal regulation perspective, though thermal regulation is rapidly becoming someone else's problem as your biological heating system transitions from active operation to standby mode, and then to whatever comes after standby mode in the operational manual for aging marine mammals. Your body drifts with the current like a biological life raft that's completed its primary mission and is now transitioning to passive mode, allowing the Arctic waters to take over navigation responsibilities that you've been handling personally for several decades with varying degrees of success, and an increasing number of complaints to management about working conditions, overtime hours, and the lack of adequate breakroom facilities in the liquid nitrogen department of the ecosystem. The deep, encompassing silence that fills your ears creates an acoustic experience like being inside the world's largest, quietest library, where all the books are written in a language you used to speak fluently but can no longer quite remember how to read, and the librarian has finally turned off all the overhead lights and locked up for the evening, leaving you alone with the comfortable darkness and the growing realization that your library card has expired and won't be renewed for the next lending period. This silence feels different from the usual background noise of Arctic Ocean life. No more ice creaking overhead like a really large, really slow demolition project. No more pressure waves from distant predators conducting their business in the liquid neighborhood. No more electrical signatures from fish going about their daily routines of trying not to get eaten by things like you, who are now transitioning from predator status to environmental feature that occasionally makes bubbles and contributes to the local mineral content of the seawater. The absence of sound creates a sensation like having your personal soundtrack finally reach the end of the playlist after running continuously for 4 decades, leaving you in the kind of quiet that would be peaceful if it weren't accompanied by the gradual shutdown of all the biological systems that have been providing background music for your entire Arctic career. Your ears, those biological monitoring devices that have been processing underwater acoustics for your entire professional life as a marine mammal, now receive only the sound of your own circulation system as it transitions from active service to whatever classification comes after active service in the Employee Handbook for Aging Narwhals. Trust me, the soft pull of the current guiding you toward the deeper, darker parts of the Arctic Ocean feels like finally getting directions to a really exclusive restaurant where the dress code is formally alive, and the reservations are handled by gravitational forces rather than customer service representatives who might ask awkward questions about your ability to pay the check or whether you have companions joining you for dinner. The descent into the dark depths operates like the world's slowest, most expensive elevator ride to a basement level that doesn't appear on any building directory, and where the elevator music has been replaced by the gentle sound of water pressure gradually taking over responsibility for decisions about your immediate future. Your body becomes one with the current in a way that would be spiritually meaningful if it weren't happening to someone whose spiritual beliefs have been shaped primarily by decades of trying not to become fish food in an environment where philosophy is a luxury that most creatures can't afford to pursue, while simultaneously managing the complex logistics of not freezing solid. The sensation of dissolving into the endless water feels like finally getting to merge with the company after working as an independent contractor for your entire career, except the company is the Arctic Ocean, and the merger involves your individual consciousness becoming part of a much larger, much colder corporate entity that has been in business for millions of years and has excellent job security but terrible working conditions and no employee benefits package beyond the basic promise of eventually becoming part of the mineral content of seawater that will nourish future generations of creatures who will face identical challenges in an ecosystem that shows no signs of implementing improved management policies or workplace safety regulations.